Excellent. So if we just kick off and introduce ourselves, there are a number of friends here that have joined us this evening. And for those that don't know us, just wanted to share a little bit about our background. And Rob, I will leave you to introduce yourself very shortly. But just a refresher, I'm Christina Brooks, CEO and founder of Rubik. So we are inclusion recruitment specialists, which mean that we partner with organizations who wish to be more representative of the customers that they serve. So we access underserved communities which have historically been overlooked and restricted from accessing decision-making roles within business. So we are real inclusion activists and champions within this space. We then go on to build DEI strategies and host virtual and in-person workshops to facilitate those really deep discussions and get actionable plans set up to support culture transformation. So that's just a bit of a reminder about Rubik, who we are and what we do. So Rob, we would love to hear a little bit about you and your business at Reward Gateway.
Brilliant. So thank you, Christina. So my name is Rob Hicks. I'm the Group HR Director at Reward Gateway. Reward Gateway is a business that delivers employee engagement solutions to over 2,000 clients across the globe. And what we do is very simple. We enable organizations to make their place a better place to work through a variety of different software tools through the medium of employee engagement.
Wonderful. Thank you for joining us, Rob. It's a real pleasure to have you here with us. So the Great Resignation, what is it? Now, initially, this turn of phrase really took hold last April, and it was actually born out of a mass exodus in the States. So over 4 million US employees resigned. They took voluntary redundancy at the height of the pandemic. So almost 1 year on, since COVID really took hold globally. So this seismic shift in the States really had an impact here for us too in Europe, leading to abnormally high levels of attrition and record-breaking job openings. And so to kick off our conversation, Rob, before we go into some of your insights as to what has really led to this Great Resignation, I wonder if we could engage our audience. And we're just about to populate a slide here. And I would like to know who from our guests this evening, who are considering leaving their organization. Now, this poll is completely anonymous, so we cannot track it back to any one person, Kamal, Yasmin, and anyone else on the Rubik team. So if you want to just populate the poll there, Kamal, and please just answer, are you considering leaving your organization? And then we will share survey results later. So while you're answering that question there, Kamal, I wonder if you could shift to the next slide for us, please. Wonderful. So a Microsoft survey of over 30,000 global workers showed that 41% of employees were considering quitting or changing professions this year. Now that is astronomically high, Rob, as we've already touched on. Can you share some of your thoughts and insights as to what might be driving this and how this has come about?
Yeah, sure. And I think you're right that from one of your earlier points is that there was a lot of change a while ago. And I think that what happens with change is it fuels more change. And so once people start to move organizations, they start to talk around it. It starts to become a normal part of kind of what occurs. For me, I think that the Great Resignation almost indicates an exit, but I actually think it's a move around. So I actually prefer the term the Great Adjustment, because I think people are adjusting what they're doing within their work environment. And there's three key factors for me. The first key factor is COVID, which has enabled a transformation in working patterns and working environments, the work-life balance, working from home. And I think it really simply, it's given people a perspective on what's really important in their lives. And once you grasp that level of perspective, it's quite hard to go, I've spent 2 years dealing with something which is really important for me or changing my life, and I'm now going to stop and go back. So I think that's an adjustment they're going to have to adapt to. The second point is some employers haven't demonstrated empathy during the crisis.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of employers have done their best. Sometimes there's been really challenging circumstances. Businesses which are in the retail sector have been really hard hit with support and then just a variety of different challenges there. But I do think some organizations, when they look back, will have possibly taken a slightly short-term view, rather than a long-term view of engaging their people. And I think the last one is a lens which will drive people to look and will be a decision-making process for change. And that is, what's the flexibility? What's the support? What's the genuine care for well-being for employees kind of going forwards and also in the past? And to me, this is kind of links back to the EVP is, does my organization treat me well and value me? And if the answer is not a good yes, then maybe I need to look elsewhere, irrespective of all of the other factors.
Yeah. And Rob, it's really interesting that we should be in the grips of this new adjustment in the middle of a pandemic, because you would think that most people want to double down because of job security, and because it was so ambiguous. Nobody knew, if their jobs were at risk. But in fact, it's gone the other way.
Yes. But I think there's a really simple explanation for that, which is it's 2020, 2021, and now in 2022.
Yeah.
The technology to support businesses to make that transition, and I will always caveat this, I always come with a bias towards office-based office workers, just because that's my world. And I realize that people who do amazing jobs, who are working in a supermarket, working in retail, or working on or doing frontline services, maybe have a little bit less flexibility around that. But when we're talking about the office worker, there is historically low interest rates. There's a lot of money around to invest into technology, into tech businesses. And when you're thinking about making a move or having a conversation with a prospective employer, it's never been easier to have an interview, or even have 3, 4, 5 interviews in one day, because you do two before breakfast, 2 at lunch, and one when you finish, and you've done all of those from the comfort of your own home. So that ability to engage with other employers is never been easier. So I think that's kind of the access to opportunities is so high. And I think in terms of the question is, what are the circumstances? And I think that people are able to look at organizations, see how they've done with COVID, look to their opportunities. Career websites have never had more information. The wonderful Glassdoor reviews are there for you to judge, and your employees are holding you to account, or they're voting with their feet.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I'd love to engage our audience again and just find out what their answers were, in terms of how many here, as part of this discussion today, are considering leaving their organization. So Kamal, would you be able to share on that next slide, please, what the answers were from that survey? So we had 35%. Interesting. So majority no. So I would love to hear from them in the chat as to things that your organization is doing that is really keeping you loyal and engaged during this time, because it is such a candidate-driven period of time. So I'd really love to find out from some of the participants, perhaps what you're enjoying about your role in your organization, what they're doing well to keep and retain you.
I'd actually say that result doesn't surprise me, because if you think about it, is 1/3 of people are looking, but I wonder how many people are actually would take a phone call from a trusted friend or a former colleague to say, I've got an opportunity, yeah, and would you do that? And my guess is that would probably be most of the other 2/3 would take the call, which would then might lead to do that. So if we think of the question in another way, 1/3 of people are definitely looking to leave, whereas the other 2/3 kind of haven't yet found the right opportunity.
13 days into the new year. Brilliant. So what does COVID, what role does COVID play in this conversation then, Rob? So how does this upward trend in resignations relate to COVID-19, and what other reasons do we think sit alongside that?
I think the first thing is the impact on your life for COVID. And what I'm going to do is I'm not going to talk about the really challenging elements of lockdown and not being able to do lots of things. What I'm going to do is talk about the opportunity that being asked to work from home has given people. And I'll talk through my own personal lens. The ability to exercise, come back from whatever I'm doing exercising. For me, it's running, to get my kids up, to get them breakfasted, ready for school, to send them off for school, to get ready myself, and then to be at my desk. And I can do all of that by 7:45. Whereas if I wanted to get to work for a normal time and do all of those things, I've got to get up an hour earlier, and I'm going to have an hour commute. And that's hard. And then what you've also got is, if you want to do anything after work, which involves an activity that isn't centered around where your work is, you've then got all of those travel components. So it is that freedom to increase personal time. I think a lot of people I've spoken to have spent more time at work because they've had less commuting time. And I think that this will level itself out eventually, but that freedom.
But Rob, just on
Yes.
that point, because I hope that is the case, I think the word that I've heard the most that came up throughout 2021 for me was unsustainable, was because we removed that commute time. So you have found a really efficient way to do something that is, engaging you, your family, and you're benefiting from that. When actually a lot of people that I speak to now no longer have lunch breaks. They don't have time to go to the loo. They don't have time to make tea because of the pressures that are coming down from their organizations. They're expected to do even more. And the guys that do stay and are being loyal want to show up. So they don't want to let anything slip. So they're almost getting 2 days done in one.
Yeah, I think you're really right within that challenge. But the people who are talking around the challenges that you've just kind of shared there, they're the ones who, if they get the phone call, are be the ones who are going to be right to be leaving, because there's organizations who are able to offer that balance, because they've worked out that engaged employees are the ones which are really going to drive the business performance. And I think it is this kind of challenge there. And what I think this really kind of comes back to at a strategic level is, how are you explaining what it's like to work where you are, and does that match up to the reality? I also think that there's a really important lens, which I call the other half of the equation, which is, I see engaged employees as one part of it, but then I see the diversity, equity, and inclusion lens, and how inclusive you are and how authentic you are as a business within what your actions are within that space, as well as being kind of really important. I think when I look at the different types of employees and from people I talk to, the more senior you are, the more important the environment is going to be. Whereas I think that if you're earlier in your career, the salary is going to be an important driver, because that's a measure for how you're growing at this moment in time. So I think it's really interesting to see what organizations are doing, how are they adjusting. We've seen lots of attempts to return to work on a more regular basis, and each attempt has been kind of stymied by COVID or by the government then saying to work from there. So I think that there is this real balance, and it is going to be the war for talent again, but it's not going to be called that. It's got a rebrand to the Great Resignation.
Yeah, and I think you're quite right there, Rob. And I think that what's been really kind of prevalent in the conversations over the last 2 years is the demand on business to answer to social issues in a way that they never have before. So during COVID, it was beyond the health and safety aspect of it. They had to go above and beyond making sure people had, workstations set up at home. It was, how are you taking care of your mental health? Having the extra day. We saw Bumble close down their office for a week to give all employees a break. I think Google did something, the same. They were having all these extra kind of well-being days. And of course, we would be remiss not to mention the employees that really found it hard when organizations didn't speak out against the George Floyd murder and the protests that then happened in America and globally. There's a different response now. So I think that we've got a different we've got multi-generations in organizations that expect and demand different things. And it's trying to adjust. I think that organizations are having a real problem, challenge to think about how they can respond to some of these without losing perhaps some of the older generations that just think there's no place for this in business. But actually it's really going in that way. So I'd love to ask our guests here today. So we've got another poll coming up. Kamal, if you don't mind bringing that up for us. So I would love to know if once you've decided to make a move, so if you are thinking about your next role at this current in time, is there something that your current employer could do to keep you? What could they do to retain you? So that's just a yes or no question. And then again, if there's anything that you would like to share in the chat, what that might be, that'd be really interesting and insightful. So, Rob, I suppose that the next thing then, what are some of the challenges for organizations with it being such a heavily led, such a heavily candidate-driven market right now? What does that mean for business? What does it mean for recruitment, the talent acquisition function? How is that impacting decisions that they make today?
I think for me, it's probably the first time that the recruiters themselves are able to kind of be front and center of every job queue and opening. So there's never been a better time to be a recruiter. So anybody looking to make a move into talent acquisition, you pick the right time. From a business perspective, I think there's two halves to this equation, which is what are you doing to retain your employees? And then what are you doing to attract new ones? So for us, we're a mission-centered business to make the world a better place to work. Like Bumble, we did a well-being close down. We did it in between Christmas and New Year, and we did it. And this year was our second year, so we did it in 2020 and then in 2021.
We did as well.
Yeah, we've also increased our kind of well-being support. So increased the number of kind of well-being coaches which we have. We've tried to make sure that we have a real balanced approach to kind of being in the office and not in the office. We've increased the amount of support we give for people who spend more time at home through kind of work from home bundles. So it's really asking ourselves the question, how can we improve our employees' environment when they're not in the office is a big thing for us. And when we're looking outside to the candidate lens, it's really asking ourselves, what's going to be a difference for us to attract people, and making sure that our EVP is relevant to both our existing employees, but also our prospective employees, but also relevant in each of the 4 countries where we hire. So we have a single EVP framework, but we adjust that based on the different needs in each of the countries. And I think there's a really important aspect, which is the UK has a very particular lens and requirements, whereas you go to Bulgaria or Germany or the US or Canada or Australia, they will have a slightly different set of requirements. So it's really understanding the requirements for your company in each location, not just taking a whole company view.
And so I wonder our guests are thinking today, so what could that look like? So is there anything that your current employer could do to retain you? What does that look like? Was that a yes or no? So Kamal, if you could populate the results for that, please, that would be great. Yes. So we've got 65% that have said once they've decided to make a move, there is something that their current employer could do to retain them. So again, I would love to find out, and I don't know if there's anybody here who would just have to share in that chat box what that could look like. I mean, Rob, what innovative things have you seen? You've referenced a host of intervention that Reward Gateway are looking at, and at Rubik, we did something similar. For 2 years in a row, we closed the offices that entire week between Christmas and New Year's. We also have a half an hour diarized in the calendar every day to make sure that people are just getting that time away from the screen. On a Friday, we have a weekly creative session, because I think we can sometimes get so drawn down into our day-to-day operational part of our role in our job that actually we just need to lift our heads up above the parapet and really kind of inject that innovation and creativity. So I know it's certainly something that I look forward to in my week, but have you seen any other innovative solutions?
Yeah, I've seen lots of great things from when I talk to my HR colleagues across the kind of across the globe in different organizations. The first thing I think is companies that listen to their employees will do best. So it's surveying and then taking actions on those surveys. I think secondly, it's actually being authentic, and when you're doing anything, it's making sure that you're explaining what you're doing and why. It's having open and honest communications at the center of what you do, and making sure that you're talking about business change. If something challenging is occurring, explain it, because actually once you've explained it, that noise goes away because people know. And my sense is for every hour you spend on communications, you save 10 hours of business time of chatter, trying to guess what's happened. But I think that in terms of when you start to look at a core area, I think it's making sure that you're recognizing your employees and realizing that there are financial constraints for some. So, but recognition can be an e-card, it can be a thank you, it can be a small financial recognition, it can be a shout out on a CEO blog, but it's about being consistent and doing that. I also think it's about looking at what you can do from a benefits perspective to see what things you can add in. And again, it doesn't have to be huge amounts of money. It can be, do you have a discounts program? Do you have access for your employees to make savings kind of when they're doing their regular shopping, so they can feel as if life is maybe not as expensive as it could be? And lastly, just in terms of, to finish this bit off, it is kind of the well-being solution. Do you have a well-being solution which looks after your physical well-being, your mental well-being, and also your financial and physical? So we do boot camps every Tuesday now, which we just relaunched, where everybody comes together and we do different sessions, and we've got a coach who is coaching all of our staff. We've got we use a technology called MoveSpring to help us with step challenges and other events. We've made sure that we have an EAP which is accessible to every single employee globally in the language in the country within which they work. We've got
an EAP, Rob. Just share that acronym for people who are not.
Yeah, so that's an employee assistance program. So when your employees may be having a challenge, which could be they're suffering from that there's some legal challenges which they've got, so you can call up and you can get kind of immediate triage advice on different issues kind of relating to any form of kind of assistance. And it's about picking the right partners to work with to deliver all of this. And I think this always goes back to the first thing I said at the beginning, was surveying and asking. You do that to find out, and then you assess as you go along as to what's working. And then what you do is, if something's not working, you stop, or if it's really working, you see what you can enhance.
Brilliant. And Rob, I think in line with what you've just said, I'm just looking at some of the notes here. So Adil said that it's beyond well-being reward, it's about healthy organization as well. So meaningful work, positive workplace and culture. Absolutely, we both agree with that. James has said that it's upskilling as well. And Marisha has said job title change, HR courses paid for. This is a big thing that we hear time and time again. You know, organizations really need to think about investing in their people, so putting them on the right training courses and upskilling in large teams. Brilliant. Thank you, guys. I don't know if I've missed anybody else there. Offering opportunities for professional development. Yeah, absolutely. So I think we've touched on all of those. So this leads us into our final poll question then. And we've touched on so many of these reasons, and I think that we will probably get a resounding answer for this. But there was a piece of research that was conducted across 1.4 million Glassdoor reviews for companies across 38 industries. And really, they wanted to understand, aside from salary, which of the following do you believe to be the highest cause of attrition? So Kamal, if you could populate that, please, I would love to see what our guests think to that this evening. And I'm pretty sure that they will get the right order of this. But aside from salary, which of the following do you believe to cause the highest attrition? So while they're having a think about that, Rob, I just wondered if you could really go over some of those, the ways that we can look at to minimize the impact of the great resignation or adjustment within our own organizations. So from your perspective, what would that look like? What's some tips that we can take away today?
Yeah, thank you. So the first thing is you've got to make sure that whatever you're doing is actually meeting the needs of what's required. And every organization will be slightly different. Its demographics will be different. But also, as time goes on, things will change and your employees may need different things. So it's ask them. I would say as a cultural piece, you've got to make sure that your communications are open and they're honest and they're timely and efficient. So we have a saying is we tell people what we know when we know it. And that means that you have a focus on doing business rather than wondering kind of what's occurring. I think a simple thing you can do is to do something like a work from home bundle, which means that you try to replicate how people's work environment is to kind of make being at home as comfortable as possible. I'd also say that it's looking at some of your benefits and some of your kind of more tangible offerings, which don't need to be expensive. So your recognition and your discounts program, making sure you're offering those as real basics to make sure you've got a thank you culture and you're giving them something or something back. And then I think it falls down into the next piece, which is around how authentic you are in everything that I've shared and explained, but also in the other areas of engagement and diversity, equity, and inclusion, because you've really got to be living correctly what you say you're going to be doing. Because I think every employee will give you a chance, but if you let them down, they might give you one more go, but I don't think they'll be letting you kind of make the same mistake twice. And so unless you're really doing sustainable things in everything which I've spoken and on the well-being side as well, I think that's going to create kind of a challenge. So look at what you're doing, do a stop start, continue on as much as you can, really double down on what's going to be effective, impactful, and what's required, and then review that on a regular basis, and then pause things which start to lose and have a little bit less impact, and then really increase what's really having a good impact, but always be expecting it to be changing. Probably every quarter that you should be doing a little bit of an adjustment to be making sure that what's there is working, because I don't think everything's going to last forever. You need to be adjusting on a much more frequent basis than before.
And I mean, we've got to bring reward into this as well, Rob, because what we're also seeing, so we're looking at inclusive rewards here as part of this conversation, and pay equity is clearly a part of it. But having a conversation with a client this week, he had somebody who wanted to join his business without saying who it is. And we see this time and time again in the market, where they've gone to the point of signing contracts. And I know three people this week who've been offered a new role only 6 months into post at 20% of a pay rise. So what can we do as an organization to offset some of these conversations that we will have? Because somebody really, has commented in the chat box here is, if somebody wants to resign, have a conversation, maybe offer us a convent or career break, which is really sensible advice. You're like, yeah, that's absolutely the way. But what we're also dealing with here is this inflation on salary. What's your thoughts around that?
I think the reality here is that the market conditions, which are driven by COVID and they're driven by Brexit, means that we've got a growing desire for skilled talent, but we have a reducing pool of talent within which we can select from. So this means employees have never been in a better position to ask themselves, am I in the right organization? And is the organization paying me very, very effectively? And I think those at a certain level are at the highest end probably are less motivated by a financial adjustment, because that a lot of those things are taken care of. But if you're on 30,000 and someone offers you 35, that's a really tangible adjustment kind of that's impacting your life. And so you're going to be thinking around that. And I think organizations need to be looking at their pay structures, be trying to be as honest and transparent around that, and be looking at pay over a period kind of rather than now. I think some of the pay adjustments are going to be a little bit difficult to sustain, because things can't keep on going up as they are. And if you get 20% a year for 4 years, you've doubled your salary. And if you're doing the same job, you've gone from 30 to 60. That feels a little bit peculiar. Whereas if you're actually going up and taking on more responsibility, and you're combining a promotion with increased responsibilities and general growth, that means that you're moving up partly through skill, partly through responsibility, but also partly through market conditions, which feels more sustainable. So to me, it's about, as an organization, looking about what you can do, making sure that you're aware of what's there, and trying to build your talent to be as sustainable and as long staying as possible, but also recognizing that sometimes you might lose some great people, but just make sure that you're able to hire some really good people back in, because I think that there is a healthy level of turnover for an organization, because it creates opportunities for other individuals too.
Yeah. And so let's get the results of our last poll in from our guests here tonight. So what results do we have from our audience? Kamal, could you show those? So 71% toxic culture. That's, absolutely spot on, as I thought it would be. So these were the poll results from the Glassdoor review. So we had that beyond salary, toxic corporate culture was 10.4 times the reason why people would leave their current roles, followed by job insecurity, reorganization. We also, so in third place was high levels of innovation, which seems counterintuitive, but what they mean by that, for instance, so Tesla and Netflix have really high attrition rates over and above other companies within their industry. And this is largely in part because of the competitive nature of their business. So they're highly ambitious, they work longer hours, there's a lot more pressure applied. So it means that the pace for those guys are a lot harder than others in their industry. Then you get a brand like Tesla and Netflix on your CV. It means that you are writing your own check, right, for your next role. So it's thinking about how those kind of organizations can attract and retain their talent over the foreseeable future. Failure to recognize employee performance, we had 24% from our guests. It was 2.9 times more important than salary on Glassdoor, which you referenced earlier, Rob. It's really just that, so many ways and financially viable ways of recognizing performance. It's the low-hanging fruit. And then poor response to COVID. We didn't have any reasons from our guests here, but it was 1.8 on the others. That was really interesting. So I really just wanted to open up to the floor, and really bring Yasmin into this, because I've been so engrossed in our conversation, Rob, that I think that I've overlooked some comments from some of our guests this evening, but just wanted to invite Yasmin into the conversation to see if there was anything that we missed out there.
Oh, hello everybody.
Hi.
I'm just going to go have a look at the chat. There's been so many comments. I'm just going to go through the ones that anyone's missed. So Odal has message saying that, yes, meaningful conversations make sense for HR. Still very hard. Still very hard to implement as managers and leaders are not equipped and don't feel comfortable to do this. So I think it's just having those confrontational conversations. And I don't think people are equipped to have those.
I think, and there was a point which I saw in the chat earlier around toxic culture, and Rob, I'd love your view on this as well. A lot of the conversations that I'm having right now, because DEI is at the forefront of every single organization's agenda, some of it is absolutely tick box exercise, and it's optics. And so people are leaving because they feel that there's a real lack of integrity there between what an organization is saying. They're posting beautiful united colors of Benetton, people from all walks of life on their website, saying the right things around D&I, but they're not following through. So integrity is a huge part of why people are leaving. What are your thoughts around marrying that toxic culture to people leaving, and how we might start to think about that differently in the HR community?
Yeah, one of my friends used to have a saying which kind of we used at kind of work for a while as a strapline, which is "bad bosses ruin lives," and I think that's kind of a really catchy marketing line for engaged employees stay, disengaged employees leave, and to me this is real engagement 101. Do you have the right culture? What are your management and leadership practices? And then on some of the other areas, it is, are you able to explain when things aren't going well? And what I always say is, if you have a bad policy that you explain well, then people will live by that policy. If you have a great policy that you explain badly, then people will rally against it.
Yeah.
And for me, HR isn't a people job, it's a communications job. And it's about how we explain to our employees how we're doing, what are we doing, why are we doing it, why they should do certain things. And the toxicity within a culture is really making sure that your values and mission are aligned up. And I think if you have a strong mission, if you have a purpose and you have values, you've got to be making sure that those are being lived. And one of my favorite sayings around culture is, when someone's asked what is culture, so I forget who it was, they said, culture's what happens when no one's looking. And to me, that if you have a place where people work hard, irrespective of a boss being there, and they hold themselves to account and they call out behaviors and they hold high standards, then that business is going to be much better than somewhere where misbehaviors are tolerated, where things aren't challenged. And I think this is really where the money question comes in, which is, are some people staying where they are because they're just waiting for their life to adjust or for pay in other areas to catch up with them? But I think that eventually more people will join organizations for the right reasons, stay with them for the right reasons, and organizations which don't have the best purpose, mission, and values are going to find it harder to retain people, other than with a set of financial incentives, which are great for the short term, but it's a bit like a sugar rush.
Yeah.
Taste amazing, but 30 minutes later, you
crashed.
You crashed, and you're thinking, well, maybe I shouldn't have gone for that second slice of cake.
Yeah.
someone's had written here, so an employee talking about using new skills in areas of interest should be taken as a bonus, not ignored until they get an offer elsewhere as a result of that skill. So yeah, when you've got new employees upskilling themselves, they should be really valued. And I think, yeah, they're taking that and then they're leaving.
It's absolutely, you're spot on. It's about growth. I think the most damaging aspect for anybody in their career is stagnating, and that promotion through osmosis and being part of the front, like it's the most damaging thing. And I think that some people are taking that shortcut right now because it's so candidate led. And I think, Rob, in our earlier conversation, you warned, I think that you advised that, look, through COVID, people can get a double dip. People will have 2 blips on a CV during this period of time, and so it's just being mindful of that anything more than that, it then becomes to your capabilities become questionable. But I think that everybody, you're absolutely right, during this period, they might be seduced by the culture, they might be seduced by the cash, but it's also looking ahead, because the role that you're in now should be paying itself forward for your next role. So it's also just being able to hold that farsightedness as well as the short-term gains.
Yeah, I think I'd agree wholeheartedly with that. I think there's an element which is not discussed much now, but will be discussed over the next year or so, which is the people who've joined over the last 2 years have probably found it a little bit harder to get to the office, to engage with their colleagues, to meet their colleagues. And I think the question is, what have you done as an employer to make sure that your joiners have had the best experience of you as an organization? If you're an organization that prides itself on a whole range of connections, activities, and a real sense of connection and collaboration, that can be a little bit harder to do if you're not being much more deliberate in your actions. So someone who joined in August 2020, if they've not, they might be engaged, but they might not be as deeply embedded in your organization, not for any other reason than they just might not have been into your office. They might not have gone for the drink with the colleagues. They might not have done that work trip where you build those relationships. And I think that's what we need to be thinking about, which is, as we come out of this environment,
yes,
how can we create a together first environment where everybody feels as if that there is a great sense of team spirit, connection, collaboration, and alignment in achieving the goals of the organization.
Absolutely right. And I mean, and for us, we're a digital first organized business. And so that means that we are all remote. So some of the team are in Scotland, some of the team are in Kent, some of the team are in Leamington. So it means that we have delivery nights in, we don't have the nights out like we used to have. So, we still have to make sure that we have that cadence of getting together and the monthly team meets. And some organizations that I know, that corporate sort of FTSE 100, have coffee roulette with the team. So they're meeting new people on a weekly basis, just kind of popping into the Zoom or to the Teams breakout rooms to keep it fresh and to make sure that they're engaged while we're all working from this umbilical cord. It is hard to navigate. Excellent. Yeah. Yazza, I'm just conscious of time because this is a 45-minute session. There's so much that we could keep on talking about.
Yeah, and there's so many comments coming into the chat, and we'll have to obviously come back to them later. So yeah, Christina, you're right. We are running out of time.
I know, and I just wanted to point out Lily's always be learning, which is the ABLs there, which is true, and the onus is on us as well as our organization to make sure that we continuously upskill ourselves as well as expecting that of the organization. Rob, were there any final? Oh wait, just one thing, Risha, I just wanted to share this. I created a buddy system so that the new joiners had someone knowledgeable about the company they could go to. That's fantastic. We work with a lot of large organizations who do that as well. They have that buddy system, really, really helpful during this remote onboarding period as well.
I was just going to say there's a couple of bits which I'd love to mention, which is on top of everything else which I've shared. So we've launched 3 mentoring schemes, including a new reverse mentoring scheme during COVID, which has kind of been really kind of impactful, which is based around just trying to get people to meet people outside of their regular regimes and reporting lines. And we also use a tool called Donut, which kind of sits in Slack, and it connects people with each other to have that 30-minute donut kind of virtually with each other. And I think what my point here is that you've got to work on the social fabric as much as you have to work on the organizational processes to make sure that people know as many people as they can, because I think finding people is one part of the equation, keeping them is the other. And if they don't feel truly valued and engaged, then are they going to stay?
I agree. And it's this social piece, which is the brand new conversation and a real shift in terms of the way things have historically been. Absolutely. So lovely to see you here, Chance. I'm just going to say hello. He's saying thank you. Getting lots of thank yous in here to you, Rob. Hi, Chance. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you this afternoon, and hopefully you will join us later on this year, maybe midpoint or in Q4, just to see how things have panned out. Is this going to stabilize and more people leaving? We would love to continue the discussion with our guests here online tonight, so please drop us a line. We'd be more than happy to connect you with Rob as well if you'd love to take him up on some of the reward gateway initiatives and incentives that they have. I mean, I'm absolutely going to look into it myself. I mean, I love the sound of donut time. And we'll probably get a bit of a Dunkin' Donuts going on at the same time. But thank you so much, Rob, for that. We really appreciate your time today.
You're absolutely welcome. It's my absolute pleasure to have a conversation.
Excellent. And thank you to our guests for participating. And we hope to see you on next event that we will keep you very, very closely posted about. So thank you, everybody. Thank you for joining.